Hey guys, so today we're out at the range to talk about the FN49. In my last Patreon only video, I posted a request for you guys to submit your ideas for videos you would like to see. A lot of you had commented that you like surplus firearms, and one of the rifles that was mentioned is something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's the FN49. And that's what I have here in my hands. Now, this is a Luxembourg contract rifle. There were very few countries that actually adopted the gun, but they would be adopted in different calibers. The 8mm and the 30-06 would be probably the most common on the US market. The Luxembourg guns were 30-06. They're very popular on the US market because they chamber 30-06, which is a popular US caliber. There are Egyptian guns. I do have one of those that chamber 8mm Mauser or 7.92. And these guns were post-World War II firearms, but the history of these is really, really cool. So we're going to delve into the history of the FN49, talk about the rifle that came after it. This rifle was developed in by FN Herstal in Belgium by Dieudonné Zéève, which also worked with John Browning on the Browning High Power and would also be the father of the FAL, which is one of my all-time favorite .308 battle rifles. And so we're going to talk about this gun, show some of the interesting details of this and how it kind of dovetails into the FAL. We're going to do a little bit of shooting with it and just have some fun. So I hope you guys enjoy this Patreon-only video. We will resume public videos in the near future. Right now, Jason and I are just trying to take a break from all the chaos on the internet, but we still owe you, our supporters, some content. And honestly, we enjoy producing it because I've been doing it for so long, I don't know how not to do it. So with that being said, guys, let's get started with today's Patreon-only video about the FN49 and what a beautiful rifle it is. So let's take a look at some of the basic features of the FN49. This rifle the development started before World War II, and by the time the Nazis had invaded Belgium, the development had to stop. Dieudonné Zéève continued his development. I believe he escaped through another country to England, if I'm not mistaken, to continue the work on this gun, but it wouldn't go into production until around 1947, after the end of World War II. And it's pretty lucky that the Nazis didn't get their hands on this thing, because even when compared to the M1 Garand, which was way ahead of its time, being developed in 1938-ish, this gun is even superior to the M1 Garand in my estimation because it has more modern features. And this gun went on for further development to become what we now know as the FAL, which continued on in military service with a large number of countries. Over 90 nations used the FAL, and it became known as the right arm of the free world. And this rifle predated it, but you'll see some similarities when we get into the disassembly of the firearm. But if you take a look at it, it's pretty typical for that, late 1930 development period of modern semi-automatic firearms. Now, full auto versions of this gun did exist, but because they use a 10-round box magazine, full auto wasn't really all that practical, considering also the fact that they were chambered in 30-06 or 8mm Mauser. That's a lot of recoil for a rifle this size for a soldier to use, so they really weren't fielded in any great numbers in full auto. But let's take a look at the gun from the perspective of its overall design. So if you take a look at the front end of the gun, you're going to notice a bayonet lug out here. Most of them did not have a muzzle device. Most of them just had this nut on the end of the barrel. Then you have the bayonet lug, have our gas piston plug here, front sight obviously. Inside a gas tube underneath the front handguard is a short stroke gas piston. This would be very similar in nature to the SKS, or what would ultimately be used by the FAL. Come back here to the receiver, and we have a simple charging handle, a 10-round fixed box magazine that really kind of needs the aid of a tool. Let me see if I can grab a bullet and actually get it out here for you. There's a little tab on the back side of the magazine. It's not meant to be pushed or pried with a finger. It requires a tool. It was not meant for using interchangeable magazines, unfortunately. Let me see if I can use a bullet to get this thing out. So there's your 10-round magazine. But again, it requires the use of a tool to get that magazine out of the gun. On top, we have a stripper clip guide, common for firearms of that era. This lever here is a manual bolt hold open, but it also locks open on the last round fired when the follower pushes up on a bolt stop. So I can push this lever in, draw the bolt to the rear, push this lever in, and lock it to the rear to charge it, pull back on the bolt, release it, and it will strip around and load the weapon. Back here, I always thought this was rather interesting. The bolt handle travels in a small opening, but this was concerning to Dieudonné Zave when he was developing the gun. He didn't want, ingress of debris, dirt, mud, sand, things like that getting into the action. So you'll notice there's a little trap door you can slide that will cover up that opening, kind of like an AK opening where you have the charging handle riding back. That little trap door allows the gun to be sealed up so you don't get a bunch of debris into the action of the gun. When the gun cycles, it naturally pushes that back open. Then the soldier, after done firing, can push that port closed. On the rear, we have a adjustable for range rear sight for elevation. And the rear aperture sight can be adjusted like an FAL. You have a screw that you can tighten on one side and loosen on the other for windage. But also, interestingly enough, the front sight is dovetailed. So you can drift it left and right as well. Let's take it apart here really quick and show you what the insides of the rifle are. And it's really surprisingly simple to field strip, given this gun dates back to the late 1930s. I've dropped the magazine out. It's not necessary to do that to field strip the gun, but it does make it a bit easier. Make sure the weapon is clear. Then there's a latch here on the rear end of the receiver. And all I'm going to do is pry this latch over, put it at the 12 o'clock position, and I'm going to push forward with my thumb, and that will allow the top cover, which houses the rear sight, to come off, and the recoil spring and guide rod are held in that top cover. Set that aside. Now we have our bolt and carrier. Go ahead and draw this back. There is a recess cut on both sides of the receiver that will allow you to lift the bolt up once it hits that recess. Let me find it here. Like that. And then the bolt and carrier will come out of the gun. Now you're seeing what looks like straight up FAL. Very similar. And why do I say that? Well, first we have a bolt and carrier system where you have the bolt dropping and then, going up and down basically. And the locking shelf is right here on the rear of the bolt, just like it is on the FAL. It engages on the rear of the receiver, and there's a lug there, and that is what locks the gun. When the gun fires, the short stroke gas piston will tap the face of this carrier, which will draw the bolt to the rear, and the extractor will hold on to the rim of the case until it hits a fixed ejector inside of the receiver, and that ejector will throw out that spent case. Recoil spring pushes the bolt and carrier home, strips around. The feeding cycle is set to begin all over again. To take this out, I think it's a little bit easier than the FAL. The FAL made this process a little bit more difficult. This just slides out to the rear and lifted up. With the FAL, you have to kind of push it back. Hold on one sec. You have to kind of push it back, pinch the firing pin, and kind of pry it up and out. With the 49, it's just basically sets into a recess, and there's no prying involved. So I actually think this design's a little bit more simple than the FAL's design. That's about all you need to do to clean the gun. Now you can see you have direct access to clean the interior of the receiver to put it back together. It's just a simple matter of reversing this process. Find that locking shelf. There it is. Set the bolt and carrier down inside of the receiver. Push down and forward. Now I'm going to take the top cover, insert the recoil spring into the back of the bolt carrier, push it forward, and in doing that, it will set down, lock back into place, rotate the locking lever back down to the 6 o'clock position. Rifle's back together. I can insert the 10-round magazine. It'll lock into place, and now the last round bolt hold open will work. Pretty simple for a gun of its age. It's more simple to disassemble and maintain than even the M1 Garand. It's also known for its reliability, and had the Nazis gotten their hands on this thing early in the war, considering this thing was built, or prototypes existed in 1938, that would have been bad for the Allies. So it's a good thing this thing was kept out of the hands of Nazi Germany. All right, let's do a little bit of shooting with the gun, because I think you guys are going to enjoy that as well. All right, guys, I'm not quite sure the zero in this rifle. I don't shoot it very often. This is a 30-06 stripper clip. I'm going to set it into the stripper clip guide, and then just kind of push down on the rounds, and they'll just kind of feed into the magazine, sort of. Actually, it's probably not the right stripper clip. It might actually be a 308 stripper clip. I grabbed a stripper clip I thought that would work. I have a whole bunch of them. So you can see the rounds have loaded into the magazine, but you can also single load the magazine just by pushing rounds down in to the magazine. To charge the weapon, pull the bolt to the rear, release it. Unlike the M1 Garand, you're never going to have to push that home because it has a very, very stout recoil spring. All right, we have the target camera up and running, I think at the 200-yard target. Let's see if this thing's zeroed for 200 yards, and if I can get a hit on Mr. Challenge Target. I think that one went wild. Oh, I'm out of ammo. There you go. Not sure how many of those hit. Maybe all of them, can't tell with the ears. But yeah, very smooth shooting rifle for being in 30-06. That's a pretty big caliber. And yeah, boy, I would say the recoil impulse on this is about the same as the M1 Garand. It's a pussycat. It's not going to tear up your shoulder. I've fired guns that have a much more abrupt recoil impulse than this does. This is actually a very, very pleasant gun to shoot, both in 8mm Mauser and in 30-06. This rifle needs no introduction. This is my favorite Cold War rifle. I know I say every rifle is my favorite rifle, but the FAL truly is my favorite Cold War rifle. This is simply one of the most elegant firearms. It's extremely robust, reliable, small for the caliber that it chambers, easy to maintain, combat accurate. It's not the most accurate rifle in the world, but it definitely gets the job done. And again, 90 nations adopted this thing, so something definitely was done right in the development of this rifle. Now, at the beginning of the video, I talked about a gentleman by the name of Dieudonné Zaïve who developed the FN-49. He was also instrumental in developing this rifle. FN was in a bit of a pickle because the FN-49, started going into production right around 1947, and this thing started, to gain traction in the early 1950s. So FN had two rifles on their hands, one with a traditional wood stock that was kind of 1938 technology, and then they had this beauty, which would go on to serve throughout the Cold War, meaning it would last in military service for 40+ years. So the market just didn't favor the 49, no matter how good of a rifle it is. Most people went with this, but let's take a look inside of the FAL, and I think you're going to see that the 49 is definitely the predecessor to this, and a lot of the technology developed by Dieudonné Zaïve was rolled over into this gun, and in a good way. So this gun fires from a detachable magazine, and I have the bolt locked to the rear right now. On the left-hand side of this rifle, not all FALs are the same. There are L1A1s that don't have a last round bolt hold open. This FAL does, and so with its last round bolt hold open, when the bolt's locked to the rear, you just push up on this tab or down in normal sense when the gun's not inverted, and that drops the bolt. So now we know the weapon's empty. I'll just double check. Charging handle, left-hand side, moved from the right-hand side of the FN49, where the FN49's charging handle is reciprocating. The FAL's charging handle is not reciprocating. That means when the gun fires, the charging handle stays in the forward position. To take the FAL apart after it's clear, there's just a little lever right here. You'll also find the lever either here on the receiver or here. Push up on that lever. It will open up like this. Take your top cover off. Pull the bolt and carrier to the rear. This stem connects with the recoil spring that's located in the buttstock of the rifle. And let's take a look at this bolt and carrier. Remember how I said the FN49 was easier to take apart? This is very similar in design, but you'll notice the firing pin protruding to the rear, and it's not open. The carrier is not open in the rear like it is on the FN49. So to take this bolt out, I have to push with my thumb on the firing pin and pry the bolt out of the carrier like that. But if you take a look at them, it's nearly identical to the FN49 in design. Once again, this is your locking surface that engages on the inside of the receiver of the FAL. And just like the FN49, it's a dropping bolt design. So when it's unlocked and drawn to the rear, the bolt's in this position. When the bolt goes home, this locking shelf drops down. See how it retracts and goes into battery? It drops down, and that's your locking shelf. Just like the FN49, there's a short stroke gas piston in the FAL with an adjustable gas regulator that's outside of the handguards. On the FN49, you have to take the handguards off and use a special wrench to adjust the gas. On the FAL, you could adjust the gas mostly by thumb pressure, but they did have a wrench for that as well, but you didn't have to take the handguards off the FAL to adjust the gas regulator. So as you can see, it's very, very simple in design and very reminiscent of the FN49. And even so, that when you take the bolt and carrier out of the gun, you had the wide open space here, just like the FN49, making maintenance very, very easy. And even to clean the barrel from the chamber side versus the muzzle side, which is recommended. Just like the FN49, the gas plug on the end is nearly identical. Here's the gas regulator on the FAL. So it's really amazing to see that this is an evolution of the FN49, and this is what became so popular the world over and became that right arm of the free world. You got to kind of tilt that barrel down a little bit. Makes it a little bit easier to put this thing together. Put your bolt forward. This is probably the most challenging thing to do. I wouldn't want to do it in a hurry. Line up these little tiny slots for the top cover, slide that on, snap it closed, and the weapon's ready to shoot. Just for comparison's sake, this is the 30-06 that the FN49 shoots. This is the 7.62x51 or 308 round that the FAL shoots. Now, there were FN49s that chambered 308, but most of them would chamber larger calibers like the 8mm Mauser and the 30-06. I just wanted to show you the size comparison difference. All right, so let's load the gun up, do a little bit of shooting with the FAL, and we'll get the camera going so you can see the impacts downrange. This one, if I remember right, last time I shot it, I think it's mostly zeroed. I'm gonna find out. All right, let's shoot a few rounds out of the FAL. Obviously, the ergonomics on this gun are a bit more modern with a pistol grip and with polymer furniture versus the wood of the FN49. It's also interesting to note that the rear sight is very similar to the FN49 in that you can adjust elevation by sliding a bar, but that's not uncommon in a lot of military rifles. What's interesting to note is that the rear sight on the FN49 was protected, and this sight is not. A lot of FALs would not have protected sights. Some of the paratrooper models and other models would actually have protected rear sights, but quite often you're just going to see an exposed rear sight like this one. To charge the weapon, you have a non-reciprocating charging handle here. And what that means is when the gun fires, this charging handle doesn't move with the action. The gun will typically fire from a 20-round box magazine like this. There are larger magazines out there, but typically militaries use the 20-round magazine like you see here. It's a rock and lock magazine. You put the front in first and rock it back into place. To release the magazine, there's a little button right here, and some of these controls will vary between rifles, but in general, especially with the FN manufactured guns, you have a little button here by your index finger. Push that, it'll kick the magazine out. You also have the option of just stripping the magazine out, hitting that lever with the thumb, and rocking the magazine out, rocking a fresh magazine in. All right, so let's go ahead and load up 5 rounds at 308. We have the camera running at the 200-yard challenge target. Let's see if this thing's zeroed. Yeah, moved it up to 200. Oh, I should also point out, this is the selector lever. It's currently in safe. Flip it down to 1. That's fire. If it had full auto capability, it would swing around even further. And bolt locks open, last round fired. Kick that magazine out, reload, repeat. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed taking a look at the FN49. It's a really cool piece of military history. I hope that answers at least some of the questions that you guys may have had about the rifle. They can still be had out there on the market, but the prices have gone up substantially. I remember 20 years ago seeing these things for sale for like $400 or $500, and now ones in really, really nice condition go for 3 times that. I haven't looked for one in quite some time, but they've gone up in value, and that's why it's always important when you find, current imports of surplus rifles. Don't hesitate. If you have the money, pick one up, because generally they become good investments and they only appreciate in value over time. All right, so let's load this bad boy up with the last 3 rounds of 30-06 I'm willing to fire, because I don't have that much of it at all. And yeah, I also forgot to point out the safety lever on the FN49. See how it blocks that trigger? So if you reach down, feel, your index finger will let you know that the weapon's unsafe. Flip it up, and then you can go straight to firing. So I thought that was pretty interesting too, as compared to the FAL's selector lever. Guys, I hope you enjoy these Patreon-only videos. I do want to thank each and every one of you for sticking with us through this thick and thin. You guys mean the world to me, Jason, and our families. Without you guys, we simply couldn't do it. So we're going to sign off for now. If you guys have any other ideas you would like for future Patreon-only videos, and we will get back to making those public videos again. But if you have any ideas for things you want to see, I know that you guys mentioned the infield. We will bring out an infield here in the next video probably, and we'll talk about it. But again, if you have any other video ideas, please list them down below, because I do read all of your comments. Guys, again, thank you for all the support. We love you guys. So cool. Now I got to go clean her up, put her away, and shoot her again in 5 or 10 years. Thanks, guys.